Hello, and happy New Year 2023. It's still early in the new year. I'm really excited to be here with you. And today we're going to be talking about 5 ways to increase your leadership courage. So I'm going to check in here in a minute, look at the comments and see who's here. So if you would, because I don't know if you're there unless you let me know. So if you'll type in your name and where you're from, I'll check in later with a few people. And I want to just kind of go over what we're going to do today. I've got a visual that I want to share with you. So I want to say this first. There's never been more uncertainty, more change, and more conflict than there is right now. But there's never been a better time to lead because you have to live up to those challenges. So whether you're a seasoned leader or whether you're just starting your journey, today is really about how to grow as a leader, how to grow your own conflict. And so today we're going to talk about 5 ways, 5 solid strategies for expanding your own leadership courage so that you can work on yourself, but also mentor the leaders that are under you or aspiring leaders. So I'm going to show you what we're going to talk about today. You can take a snapshot of that in case you don't get to stay for the whole time, and you can come back later. It'll be here on LinkedIn, and I'll also put it on my YouTube channel. So here's where we are: 5 ways to increase leadership courage in 2023. So I'm going to be talking about these 5 in depth and why it takes courage so that you'll have that snapshot in your mind. And so first of all, it's going to be tell yourself the truth. Number 2 is set new boundaries. Number 3 is to promote personal responsibility. Number 4 is to stop appeasing, and number 5 is to become a radical listener. And if you've ever taken any of my online webinars and workshops, I do a lot around radical listening. It's something that I work on all the time. I'm going to check in real quick. Hi there. I see Shannon. Hi, Shannon from Indiana. Mary Brown. Hey, Mary, another great resource for managing conflict. You can check out her podcast. Jennifer Samuelson and Faisal Patel, Rick Wood, someone from Estonia, Katie Liz Loyal, and Shanka Whitehurst. Thank you all for being here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'll check in a couple of times if you have questions. Also, if you'll notice, I have my website and my email, a little banner at the bottom. I would love for you, if you have some ideas for topics in the future for 2023, we've got several months ahead of us. I'd love to hear what you're wanting to learn about. I'm also planning on doing some webinars that are for pay, separate from LinkedIn, and I'd love to get you on my list for when that happens. So anyway, I'm excited to get started here. So the first one is to tell yourself the truth. They don't really teach you this in college or in leadership classes, but it's one of the most important ways you can become more courageous. Again, it's something I'm working on. It's not always easy, but here's the deal. We all have blind spots. We all have blind spots. We will continue to have blind spots as long as we're living and growing. So it's really important that you assess your leadership challenges. And I'm not just talking about taking a DISC or a Myers-Briggs. Those are great. The Colby, all these things are great. But do you really dig deep and ask others what they think? It can be difficult. So you want to find out, what do others think of you? And you want to look at some of your habits. Have you been letting people off the hook? Have you been avoiding some conversations? Do you find that you're too aggressive? That's kind of one that I'm working on right now. It seems like the pendulum swings. If you've been afraid to speak truth, if you've been afraid to address issues, then sometimes you get too aggressive. So we're always trying to find that balance and put things into context. Have you been called a micromanager? I just did an article on Smart Brief about that, because if we're all honest, most of us have done that before. I've micromanaged, and I've been micromanaged. Is that something that you do? And if so, why? Start digging deep. This is all about self-awareness. Do an anonymous survey. Let people tell you what they think of your leadership. Just that back and forth can help you to just start watching some areas where you need to grow as a leader to make you more effective and just to grow as a person. So why does it take courage? It takes courage because the very first sign of increased awareness is aversion. I didn't know that for a long time, but when I started writing books, finally, by the time I had a third or fourth book and I looked back at my first book, I kind of cringed and I thought the writing isn't that good. Now that's self-judgment, but things have changed a lot since 2011. But it's also a reminder that what we thought was good and effective at a certain point in our life becomes no longer acceptable. And so you're going to have some aversion. That's why it takes courage to really look at how you're growing and how you're improving, looking back at where you've made mistakes or where you weren't as good as you thought you were. You have some aversion. And you've heard that saying, the truth hurts. It really hurts if you're in a blind spot or in denial about something, because it's painful to have others think something about you. And it doesn't mean that that's the truth, but it's just a little bit painful at first. And we all know what it's like to get feedback that feels like we've been misjudged. And sometimes we are misjudged. But nonetheless, it takes courage to feel those feelings, even if someone's not accurate on what they're giving us. The truth hurts, especially if you've been shielding yourself. But here's the good news. Once you build up the strength, the truth will really set you free. So it's not all bad, but it does take courage to tell yourself the truth. So I'm going to check in again. Hey, Carlos, someone I see a lot on my thread. Thanks for being here. I'll just show a few people right now. Hi, Amit. And hi there, Pooja and Matthew. I'm so glad you're all here. And this is kind of a new friend right here. I think is Joyta, but I could be wrong. We have people from all over. So it's sometimes, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'm so appreciative of you being here. Okay, we're going to go to the second strategy on creating more leadership courage. I've done programs on this before. Like I did one on LinkedIn when they experimented with doing live LinkedIns that were for pay. And I plan on doing this one a little bit later as a workshop. So if you're interested in that, just drop me an email and I'll put you on the list to be reminded when that happens. But the second one is to set new boundaries. We talk about boundaries, but a lot of times we don't understand what it is. And what I have found, and I've done a program on this, of the 4 reasons for relationship problems, one of those reasons is the inability or the unwillingness to set appropriate boundaries. So how do you know a boundary needs to happen? Well, the first way you know is through your emotions. You're going to be feeling some anger or resentment. And I always try to interpret that as, do I need to set a boundary? What have I allowed? What is happening that shouldn't be happening? So it's how you feel. Learning to identify and notice how energy is processing through your body is very important, rather than stuffing it and saying, oh, well, we're all adults. For example, if your open door, which is a good thing, has become a revolving door, where you're doing more than your fair share, you're fixing everyone's problems, where you start to care more about their success than yours, you probably need to set a boundary. And so that's just some ways to notice that. And in the workshop that I do on that, you learn about 2 or 3 different kinds of boundaries, why they're difficult to keep sometimes, how to notice when you need to set one, but giving you the overview of how to increase your courage is learn to set boundaries and you won't feel so much resentment. And a boundary is not a boundary. You can enforce it unless there's a consequence that you can enforce. So I'm going to talk about why it takes courage. First of all, you have to own the part you played. So this goes back to number 1, tell yourself the truth. Something wouldn't continue to happen if we somehow didn't allow it or we were unaware of it. So you have to own the part you played, which is that truth telling. And here's the reality. When you set a boundary, someone is going to be unhappy with that boundary. Someone is going to be unhappy when you change. And even though they say, no, I understand, I respect that, the moment you try to enforce it, you're going to get a lot of pushback, and that's where it's difficult. What you have to remember is the reason you needed a boundary in the first place is your own unhappiness. Something was happening that was against your company policy, against what you need as a leader, or even in your personal life. There's something happening over and over that isn't working for you, and it's working for the other person. So your biggest challenge, this is the big secret. The reason a boundary doesn't work, the biggest challenge is going to be giving up the need for them to agree or understand. Because the reason you needed a boundary in the first place is because you were the one being done wrong, so to speak. So remember this. Someone is going to be unhappy when you set boundaries, but it doesn't always have to be you. And it just takes courage to let people feel what they feel without having to back down from your boundary. Okay, so we've talked about tell yourself the truth. We've talked about setting boundaries, and we've talked about why it takes courage. We're getting ready to go to number 3, which is promote personal responsibility. I'm going to check in real quick. I'm going to say hi to some people. Hi, Jack. There's a user from Mozambique. That must mean we're not connected. Jessica from Topeka. And Matt, hi there from North Carolina. So glad you're all here. Let's go on to number 3, promote personal responsibility. So observe yourself and others. And I talk about this in my book. This is my book, From Conflict to Courage. Observe yourself and others when there's a victim mentality. We're creating right now a lot of victim mentality. There's a lot of narrative out there about blaming other people and not finding our own empowerment. So we as leaders have to promote more empowerment, more personal choice, more seeing possibility versus what's holding us back. Because when there's always someone to blame, we don't fix it that way. We fix it by new choices. We fix it by conversations. So if someone's always to blame, if there's gossip and getting social proof, then that is a problem. So let's talk about why it takes courage to promote personal responsibility. First of all, I want to say this. Anytime you start promoting something like courage or personal responsibility, it boomerangs right back to you, and you start getting this new awareness about what you need to do. And so it will show up in your life where you lack courage. It will show up in your life where you lack personal responsibility. So it's very difficult because what you promote, you have to become that in order to be an example. And what that means for me is that it's okay for me to mess up because I'll share my story and it'll help other people. But we don't get off the hook just because we're promoting something. We have to live it to an even deeper value. And so why it takes courage. You have to beware when an employee comes to you and you're caught in what I call the power of attorney trap. I write about this on my LinkedIn newsletter. You can find that. I've written about the power of attorney trap. It's when someone comes to you and says something like, well, everyone thinks this is unfair, or everyone says this. You have to be careful not to get drawn in, and you need to say, what do you think? And most of the time they'll deflect, oh, I'm fine with it. I just need you to know what everyone else thinks. But the way you start promoting personal responsibility is to make people represent themselves. Otherwise, you're going to be caught on that drama triangle. And if you don't see the signs, you too will get trapped into gossip and listening to half truths because it feels like you're getting inside information, especially if it's someone that's a good worker, someone that you like, a colleague. It's really easy to get distracted and not see these signs. So really make people represent themselves instead of being the one that represents the entire group, unless everybody's agreed, they've signed something, and this person has been given the agreement that they can represent everyone. Make the group talk to you, talk to other people, not just one person. And then if someone's got a problem and they're coming to you complaining about someone else, whether it's someone coming around their boss or whether it's someone and you're a colleague and they're coming to you, actually help them to go to the person they have the conflict with. And if you need to have them both in there with you, but to just hear one side of it, what you want to do is coach that person to see their choices and to have the courage in the right spirit to go to the other person so that they can resolve the conflict and get that elephant in the room, get the cards on the table, to use all these cliches. You want to stand above it all and not get roped in by your feelings. So that's why it takes so much courage to promote responsibility, because you have to do it. Then you have to learn how to coach others so that you can really see those signs that you're contributing to or creating a victim mentality in your workplace. So back to go over to what we've done so far. Tell yourself the truth, set new boundaries, promote personal responsibility. And we've talked about why it takes courage. We've got 2 more to go. I'm going to check in real quick. And I'm seeing some people are liking this. Thank you so much, Marianne and Jack. And if you're here and you're from another country, I'd love to see that. Once again, there's my website, marlenechism.com. You can sign up to get resources. We're getting ready to do some fun things this year. doing some public webinars and so on. Or if there's a topic, a challenge that you have, if you want to keep it anonymous, go to Marlene at marlenechism.com. Let me know what's going on. I'm researching all the time. I love to hear from you. So it's not a bother to me. I want to collect this information. Let's go to number 4. Number 4 is to stop appeasing. Well, as most of you that have been following me for a while know, I published my book, From Conflict to Courage. I'll show it once again. From Conflict to Courage last year. It's how to stop avoiding and start leading. And in that book, I talk about what I call the 3 A's. So let me back up for a moment. One of the tenets of the book is that conflict is not the problem. Mismanagement is the problem. Conflict is what it is. We're going to have disagreements. We're going to see things differently. But what the problem is how we manage it within ourselves and with other people. And so one of those, the 3 A's is avoidance, appeasing, and aggression. So this one about increasing your courage is about stop appeasing, because we do that in order to get things off of our plate and to feel good in the moment. So it's telling people what they want to hear in the moment. It's saying yes when you would rather say no, or when you need to say no. It's agreeing when you're not sure that you agree. Like, oh yeah, like it's different to say I hear you versus 100%. I agree, totally support you on this. There's a distinction, which we'll talk about listening here in a moment. There's a distinction between saying, I hear you, and I haven't done the research on it, but your points are valid, and I hear that this is how you see things. I haven't done enough research to say I fully support that, but I support you. There's a difference in that, and I think that would help us in the political world when we get so divided and we're so narrow-minded. We feel like it's either yes or no, black or white, up or down. We have to agree or disagree. And sometimes we just need more information. Sometimes we just need to say, as a person, I hear you. And we'll talk again about hearing in a minute. But another thing I see in the workplace is giving good evaluations when clearly there's work to be done. I see this a lot of time in government type agencies where on a scale of 1 to 5, there's a conversation once a year. And you're either going to get a 2.5 or you're going to get a 3. The top performers get a 3. The reason they don't get more is there's no money for budgets. So we can't give you a 5 or you'll complain. Then we give the poor performers that have tenure, we give them a 2.5 because they've had 2.5 for the last 20 years. So now we can't break that chain or it's going to be a problem. It's a problem to begin with that you're only having conversations once a year. And it's also a problem when you're not giving adequate feedback on a regular basis about how someone's doing in their job, because there's no competitiveness, there's no excitement, there's no value when you really know it's just a check mark and a game that we're playing. So we've got to stop the appeasing. It has to stop at every level within the organization. And here's why it takes courage. It takes courage to work on being aware of the pattern at first. It just feels bad. We've talked about this already, the aversion. To work on the pattern and to see where it is in the organization, to see where it is in our life. Because sometimes it's cultural. There's a culture of appeasing. We are the Stepford wives. There's never bad news. We're just going to say it's all good even when it's bad, and then we're all blindsided when there's a big layoff. So we want to have to be able to give up the short-term gains. That's hard for all of us, isn't it? Just to look at the bigger picture and to stop saying yes. We've got to be able to make our word golden instead of just being lazy about it. So we've got to get rid of this addiction to people pleasing, because you will be judged when you're more of a straight shooter. People will not like you as much sometimes because hear what they want to hear. They have itching ears, so to speak. And people will say, you've changed, which is probably true. As I said earlier, the pendulum swings from not being truthful and not being outright to being too much so and not meeting people where they are. So we're all trying to find that balance as leaders. But the benefit is this. You're going to be more respected and your word is going to be golden. So I'm going to do a quick review of where we've been. We've been to number 1, tell yourself the truth. Number 2, set boundaries. Number 3, promote personal responsibility. And 4, stop appeasing. Okay, I'm going to check in a couple more times. Hey, Bonnie from Branson, old friend of mine. Terry, hey, from Springfield. Glad to see some of people in my own place, my own city here. Hi, Sammy from Kenya. We've got someone from the UK. It just says LinkedIn user. I'm so glad you're here. And thank you so much for the compliment. Loving this. I want to say this too. Feel free after this is over to watch again or to share on your own thread, your own timeline. It helps me, it helps other people to get the information. I keep these short. You can use these in the lunch and learn if you want to. I don't care at all. That's what it's for. It's free. Okay, so let's go into the very last one, and then I'm going to give you that banner again so you can see it, maybe take a snapshot of it. The fifth one is radical listening, another one I'm working on. I'm not very good at it. I know the theories around it. Sometimes I do great and I'm so proud, but the reality is this takes a lot of self-management, and awareness is painful. It's painful for me too. It's painful for me to not be great at it when I talk about it and speak about it, but I am working on it, so we're all a work in progress. Here's the deal. Conflict is never easy, and that's why so many of us avoid it at all costs, or we appease, or we get aggressive because we get triggered. It's all avoidance. If you find yourself getting triggered, this is more me, interrupting, getting aggressive, or shutting down conversations. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you've got a character flaw. So, like, get rid of the judgment. It means that emotions and old programming is getting the best of you. We all are programmed. We're all biased. So we're all equal there. We all are. The only way we become less so is the awareness of it and the working on it. The skill that you need is counterproductive, and it's listening when you'd rather fight or flee. So let's talk about why it takes courage. When you're in the middle of a conflict or a disagreement, a trigger, especially, or an emotional reaction, like when you feel misjudged, disrespected, whatever it is that triggers you, because we're all different, every bone in your body wants to be understood, to make a point, to share the facts, to argue, make the other person wrong. But I have never once, like, let's talk about some other social media, not as much on LinkedIn. I've never once seen a social media thread where someone is calling someone names and then giving them facts and they go, oh, you know what? You've really changed my mind. Generally speaking, when we're emotional, facts do not work. We have to be listened to first. This is why in marriages, when the wife says, oh my God, I've lost my keys, help me. And the husband says, and I'm just using wife and husband, I know that's a stereotype, it can be vice versa. The husband says, you know, I've told you several times to put them in that bowl on the counter, or I've told you to put them in your purse. You've just now triggered a fight because the person just needs to be heard right now. The conversation about how to be better is after the emotions have subsided. So we have to be able to listen to people without giving advice or saying, I told you so, when that's the thing we want to do. So it takes a lot of courage. So when you feel misjudged, disrespected, you just want to fight or flee, but these tactics never work. So what it is, it's overriding years of programming to take a breath and say, tell me more, or to take a breath and say, I can't be available to this right now. I'm feeling triggered. And not you, I'm having a bad day. To be able to take that break is so hard. As Stephen Covey, one of my favorite authors in the world, would say, seek to understand. Seek first to understand. What I say is the one who listens first controls the conversation, but that takes self-control. So I'm going to give you that little banner once again so that you can see it, maybe take a snapshot if you want to of it. Here it is. There it is. You can, it's tell yourself the truth, set boundaries, promote personal responsibility, stop appeasing, become a radical listener. So here's the call to action. Share this on your own thread if you got value. Reach out to me, either direct message or by email, marlene@marlenechism.com, if you want to share with me what challenges or topics you'd like to hear for 2023 on these LinkedIn Lives. And again, I'm going to be doing some live webinars. They will be for fee, and I'm going to keep it reasonable in 2023. So send me your email if you want to be on the list, and I'll put you on the newsletter list, or you can go sign up at marlenechism.com, get a list of resources, and then you'll already be on a list to be notified. Thank you so much for being with me today and for letting me know you're here. And I'll see you in February. Bye, everyone.